Hey guys, under the motion, this House would implement a tough on crime approach to areas of high crime rates. Info Slides reads a tough on crime approach is a system of political and legal strategy that emphasizes hard penalties, increased policing, and longer prison sentences as a primary means of crime reduction. First speaker of proposition.
I'll start with the burden of truth. Our burden of truth is that implementing a tough on crime approach is the only way to solve the current crime problem. The current crime problem in the world has started growing at a rapid rate, with over 3 million people in the United States alone having been incarcerated for a crime. In these high crime rate areas, waiting for a counter policy will obviously take too long to actually successfully implement. This is also incredibly non-cost efficient. A tough on crime approach is the fastest and safest way to ensure that felons are punished accordingly. Introducing a tough on crime approach would not only leave an impact for current criminals within the justice system, but also leave long-term effects for generations to come. Increasing prison sentences, along with other forms of punishment such as fines, would act as a deterrent for people considering to actually do a crime. For example, in the city of Chicago, this approach would work incredibly well. As like the main reason people steal there is they know that if they don't perform a big enough crime, they won't actually get incarcerated. This results in them repeating the crime over and over in some cases, with people stealing thousands of dollars worth of merchandise from stores. There's this problem not only affects large corporations, but also small family-owned stores that are just trying to make a living. In addition, the people committing these crimes often start at a young age when they're teenagers. This means that they'll likely continue this into adulthood. Do you really want a society where there are countless people simply stealing from thrift stores? This is what will happen if we don't implement a tough on crime approach. Uh, for example, look at El Salvador. Before 2022, El Salvador was a hotbed for crimes and gang violence. Ordinary citizens would have their lives torn apart as various other gangs fought in their neighborhood. This means that oftentimes innocent children weren't even scared. Would you have preferred that to today? If you take a look at El Salvador now, their crime rate has dropped considerably. Various different gangs were completely disbanded and when their new prison security. They have prevented gang leaders from simply continuing to lead in prison. This has significantly reduced the death rate and even increased the life expectancy. How, um, in addition, El Salvador's telephone crime approach also made it it increases their economy because of the lack of corruption and gang violence interrupting with the everyday trade. Um, re Rehabilitation also wouldn't work like, because because in most countries the problem is required to be solved almost immediately. This means that programs such as rehab, which take time and effort, often taking years to successfully rehabilitate one person into being safe enough for the human world, wouldn't work in these situations. It also costs too much. Are you really willing to spend several $1,000s on just one person in the hope that they might become stable enough for society? This clearly isn't effective. In fact, the only country that has successfully implemented rehabilitation is Denmark, and they've had to spend millions of dollars in ensuring that their prisoners are actually happy. Um, in sum, by taxing 50 by the 50% happiness tax thing, it also might lead to economic downfall.
Thank you for that speech. First speaker of opposition.
Okay, I'll start in three, two, one. I am addicted to drugs. I get drugs because I have no choice, but then I get caught, and then the government imprisons me. After I serve my 10 years in jail, I come out with no family, no cure for my drug addiction, and I'm just full of hatred towards the government because they kept me away from my precious cocaine. Then, because I have nothing else to do and nowhere else to earn money, I can't find a good life. I just continue to do drugs because I'm still forced to. Nothing changes, it only gets worse. Pros. Some setup then, framing and characterization. What does tough on crimes look like? They look like more cameras, more police, more gear for the police, more handcuffs, more backup policemen to help these already existing police that have already increased in numbers. This looks like more expensive. This is very expensive also. It also drains out resources from the government because it is still very expensive to to mission a bunch of polices and like do all that kind of stuff. These areas then, how does it look like? Afghanistan and Pakistan and California and like Chicago, what like they said, you have a lot of crimes happening, but what do these crimes look like? Are they really happening because of malicious intent, especially in areas where there's high crime rates? It is not like more people are just more evil in Pakistan compared to like other countries like South Korea. It is not that Pakistani people are just more meaner than Koreans. It is because the government is very terrible, is not taking care of its duties and solving systematic injustices. This is really what these countries look like. So this is some reframing. We think that there's structural injustice, which is the root cause of these crimes. So therefore, people don't have a choice to steal because they want to put food on the table. People have no choice to do drugs because they are addicted. They don't know how to stop it. People have no choice but to do school shootings because they feel like an outcast. They feel like everybody hates them. They are mentally unstable. They feel like they have to kill everybody. The counterfactual then, their world has things like cameras and policemen, but we redirect the expensive resources and the funding that they give to these policemen into different things like improving welfare and solving poverty programs like drug health hospitals, etc., etc. Rebuttals then, they talk about how this is the only way to solve these crimes, that they take the textbook definition of why these crimes happen, which is because these people are evil. No, that's not how it works. We already reframe and recharacterize this for you. We'll explain this later on. They talk about how rehabilitation, which is our counterfactual, takes too much time and effort, therefore it's not worth doing. But just because something takes time, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. It's much better than a world where there's recidivism because the people there have no choice but to commit crimes again just to survive and live as a family and feed their own kind. They talk about how it's cost inefficient. Yes, we are willing to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on one person if that also means creating public safety for the entire society, because then that also ensures that this person won't commit crimes again. They have other options but to commit these crimes again. And then we also think that you do too, because on their counterfactual, they still spend hundreds and thousands of resources trying to create like all these different cameras around all these different types of alleyways. They send thousands of more policemen. This is still also very expensive. Argument one, then, contention one on justification. What's the government's duty? If there's something like an economic recession, then they have to be responsible for it. They're the ones who have the power of controlling the economy, and they're the ones who should be responsible for their own country and have to have the best interest of their citizens. And what's happening though on government's comparative? The citizens don't have control over the market and the economy, but when they are the ones being disproportionately impacted by the tough crime areas, they steal because they don't want to starve to death, and by then they pay the price for the government failing to rule its own country by going to prison. Then this is totally unjust. Then the government just keeps pouring resources into a bottomless pit because they aren't solving anything at the end of the day. These people still have the same incentives of wanting to stay alive and feed their family to then commit these crimes all over again. They're just putting resources into somewhere pointless. So then this does nothing but worsen the trust in the governing system. Our deputy will then later explain this as their third contention. Second argument, practical. Note that in this policy, there's no way of society developing or getting out of this high crime rate category. Prisoners don't get the help that they need. They don't get rehabilitation. They still have no choice but to continue committing crime again and again. When they get out of prison, they don't have a job. They don't have a family. They don't have a house. They can't earn money because now this criminal record taints their reputation and taints their resume. Now nobody wants to hire them. So if they did a school shooting because they were sad because they were an outcast and they felt like they were bullied, then they will only do more mass school shootings because they were still an outcast since they're a criminal and since everybody hates them. No one loves them. This entire thing neglects the root cause of the problem. It only increases recidivism rates. Denmark is one of the happiest countries in the world. Let's make ours like that too. Proud to oppose.
Second speaker of proposition, which is me. 3, 2, 1. Let's start off with the same way that the previous speaker just ended. Denmark is the happiest country of the world, so they want to make their country like Denmark. That means paying 50% tax for every single citizen. That means putting and pouring every single part of your government tax into rehabilitation when there's more important things like the economy to there's more important things like the economy to be focusing on and the reputation of your country. This means it is extremely hard, number one, for these high crime rates countries to become like Denmark in the first place because Denmark was a neutral country at first. But number two, this actually won't work because do you not think that many countries out of the 195 countries of the world have tried rehabilitation and that one country worked because the citizens agreed to pay 50% tax? Do you think that will work in countries like Mexico or countries like there's high crime rates in there? So, I'll do three things in my speech. Number one, rebuttals. Number two, the punishment magnitude is not great enough for the status quo, which is our last and final argument. And number three, on extension to our first speaker. On to my rebuttals then. They say that not because people are malicious, but because the government is not fulfilling their duty in order to do so. Why do you think they're not fulfilling their duty though? Because the police is not strong enough, and which is why we need to have which is why we need a more urgent situation and a more urgent solution, which is the tough on crime approach. Number two, welfare improvement and rehabilitation is extremely sugar-coated on their side. Do you think these governments have not tried? Do you think when you step out of the door and you imagine living in a neighborhood where stepping outside the door and dark feels like gambling with your life and where children walk to schools past gangs, drug dealers, and the sound of gunshots? Do you think that the government have not noticed this? Don't you think that the government has already proposed a solution to improve welfare and to provide therapy and mental trauma and stuff like that? Do you think that ever worked? No, which is why these countries are continuously having a high crime rates. So on to my first argument and integrated rebuttals here. The fundamental reason and the core idea to why crime rates are so high in these areas are because of the fact that criminals know and that they are aware that they will be able to sneak out or get out of prison easily and not as a huge cost, like a death sentence. And they know whatever they do, from committing a crime to stealing objects or food, that the punishment is not harsh enough. So why not do something out of desire, you know? These people do not have integrity, and at a lower scale, it's just like bullying in school because the teacher's not watching, and the worst punishment you can get is a call to your parents. Instead, it hangs upon someone's death, and the entire community's effort is being into a more sustainable future, becoming a more sustainable future. Three layers of mechanism to this argument. Number one, when the punishment levels rise, the incentive of committing crimes lessens. We don't know the full story of these criminals, but if they were to get killed under the tough on crime approach, then they of course wouldn't commit crimes as much because it is an active incentive of human beings, criminals, to stay alive. Number two, even if you do not buy this though, why is the tough on crime approach still more effective? As mentioned in our first argument, it is evident that the police system in these areas are not strong. The problem right now is extremely urgent, and we cannot wait to build up a stronger police system, enforce it, wait to get a more welfare system and a rehabilitation implemented into the society. We need a policy that will definitely and safely solve the major issues quickly and effectively, and this is what we bring up as proposition. Number three, then, the impact of this comes at a huge cost. First, understand the incentive of the government with these high crime rates in the first place. Simply put, it is to lower the crime rates of their country, and why? Principally, number one, for justification on why the reputation and the safety of the country, and practically, because the government does not want to spend and pour so much money on fields like these to protect unnecessary causes. For a world in favor of these governments, proud to propose. But now, let's finish this argument and my speech off with the victim's perspective. Imagine your mom died because of a criminal and they get sentenced for a year. A life versus a year? Isn't it supposed to be a life versus a life? We provide fair justice towards these criminals and for these victims, supporting both parties. Proud to propose. Second speaker of opposition.
I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I am a homeless person, and my only way to happiness is by seeing my wife's beautiful face along with my precious children every morning. Because I am poor, I am physically unable to make a comfortable living and can barely afford any food. Because we are poor, we have no choice but to steal, or else my family will face death, and I face punishment. So if I face punishment, what do I have left? No family, which I treasure most in my life, and no new starts. Everything is I am in the same situation I was before, except even worse because now I'm listed as a criminal and a convict. Under the strict policy of the government, people who are born under a poor society or generation cannot make a living in the current government with the policy set by the opposing team. The people who are poor may view the government as having a negative impact on society, and they may lose trust in the government for not being able to use their power and authority to help the lesser people. Looking back to Proposition's arguments. So, the government decides to talk about feasibility. This is unstrategic. They're literally the ones having to fund every single police office and camera system. Is that not expensive? And also, rehabilitation doesn't mean providing luxury five-star hotels for these prisoners. We're only redirecting the resources that you use only on your side to fund for these programs. So, if the government proves to the judge that they don't have enough funding for the rehab programs, well, they can't have their policy either. They also talk about their victims' perspective, but this was unexplained. And it's still same for the victims on their side, wherein recidivism happens again and again. Still, the government doesn't fulfill the role. Moving on to my argument. Panel. In our current society, our government is the one who sets all the rules and regulations for us. It is a source of higher power that leads us. If the society does not trust the government, it could cause a huge gap in faith. The government's job is to take care of people that do not have enough power and lend them a hand. The lesser people under this policy are unable to help themselves lead a stable life, and because of this, they have no choice between good and bad. The only other choice is death, and no human wants to choose that. When people face this situation like this, probably many, because that's the amount of people that probably will be under a poor society, will turn against the government who were supposed to protect. Yes?
Rehabilitation is your whole case. Haven't we, number one, already explained about the urgency and how urgent we need this to be? Not waiting a decade for rehab to actually be active. And number two, won't these prisoners still be alienated out of society when they are finished out of rehab and they come out to actual society?
Well, urgency is less important than the long-term recidivism. They don't think. Your policy doesn't think about the long term. Okay, moving on to my speech. Let's say citizens are acting up because of how the government is treating them. Like, for example, in history, the French Revolution, people would rise up and cause tension. There could be a possible chance of boycotts, riots, and protests. Definitely not something that would positively affect our governments.
Eli,
Yes.
in your example of the French Revolution, are you saying that Maximilian's reign of terror was better than what followed before?
Excuse me? I don't think that's relevant to my speech. Could you please
No, but like,
in topic?
okay, so like the
Okay,
people
moving on. Connecting to all the things above, how would you feel if you were a convicted person? Someone with no choice to steal and to put their actions into crime under the poor society and situation they're put in. If you want to see a world with a peaceful society, one that is not divided and is equal, please vote for us.
Thank you for your speech. Thank you for the debate. Wait a minute, let me stop this.